Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on Unlocking the Secrets of Strategic Intelligence. This webinar is hosted by Commentelli, which provides competitive and market intelligence solutions to the customers worldwide to help them turn data into insights so they can make better business decisions. This webinar today will be led by Jesper Mattel, CEO of Commentelli, and David Kalinowski, the founder and president of Proactive Worldwide.
Thank you so much, Maleka. It's a pleasure to have you all here. My name, as I said, is Jesper Martell. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Commentelli. And we are a software company that have been around for far too many years, over 20 years. We've been working with competitive intelligence. And for many of those years, we've also been working closely with our friends at Proactive as well. David and I, we met at Skip in Telecom a couple of weeks ago, live in person, which in itself was a big joy. And the topic of strategic intelligence came up many times after the workshops that we had held. So we sat down and we had a quick lunch and we started brainstorming that perhaps this is a very good topic to have a webinar on as well. It seems to be something that people are at least giving a lot of thought to. David, a couple of words about yourself.
Sure. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're at. I'm David Kalinowski. I have spent nearly 70,000 hours of my life in the market or competitive intelligence arena. Have known my friend here for probably near a decade or so, and really appreciate you inviting me to join today and discuss this really important topic. So I'm looking to just share my take on strategic intelligence based on nearly 35 years of experience in working with some of the largest, most respected companies in the world.
Great, it's a pleasure to have you here. We're going to try to make this webinar as interactive as we can. So please feel free to use the chat function, as Maleka said. I think we'll actually start off to see if it actually works. If everyone, if you can, click on the little chat symbol at the bottom of your page in the menu bar. And just let us know which city that you're joining us from today. Could be just fun to see. So type in, Basking Ridge, Munich, Atlanta, Farmington, North Kingston, Nottingham, UK, Belfast. Wow, very global crowd. Hamburg, Steve from Minneapolis, Strasbourg, Leverkusen in Germany, Amsterdam, lots of places. Nice to see. If you want during the chat or during the webinar to use the chat to tell us what some of your biggest challenges are within strategic intelligence, feel free to do that at any time throughout the webinar as well. And we'll try and see if we can help you with any of your challenges there. And then before we start as well, I tried to do a little poll just to see where people are in terms of strategic intelligence. I hope you can see that now. We have a couple of questions on time for strategic intelligence. This was something that we talked a lot about at Skip as well. How much of your time is actually spent on strategic intelligence today? Start with that. Some people spend between 80 and 100% of their time. We have 17% so far. And the second question is if you feel that you are spending enough time on strategic intelligence. Give you another 30 seconds to respond to that before we share the results. There we go. And the poll, and see if I can share the results. Hopefully you can see that now. So there are some people that we have about 19, 20 people who responded. And you can see here that some people do spend quite a lot of the time, but most of you don't. And more importantly, 60% of you feel that you should be spending more time on strategic intelligence. And then we're talking about this crowd of people. I mean, we are addressing mostly CI professionals in this crowd. And I think this is super interesting. This was one of the things that we discussed. There was a Harvard Business Review article a couple of years back that did the same survey. They found that about 97% of everyone who responded thought that strategic intelligence was critical to their long-term success for their organization. But at the same time, 96% of people who responded felt that they were spending too little time on strategic intelligence. So it's interesting to see that it's important for critical decisions, but at the same time, people aren't spending enough time for various reasons. It's easy to sort of get caught up in your everyday routines and doing more short-term work, answering emails and writing reports, etc. But really spending time to think strategically is quite hard to find these days, time to do. David, any thoughts or comments on you before we head on in on the poll results?
Let's dive in. Let's dive in.
Great. So the first question that we're going to talk about today is to sort of understand the importance of strategic intelligence. We'll talk a bit about how we define it and how it differs to tactical intelligence and other types of intelligence. So we'll spend a few minutes on that. The second part, and perhaps the main part of the content today, is what we call our 3 pillars of strategic intelligence. The 3 things that you should really consider and work on when doing this type of work. And then the final part is we'll share a couple of cases that we have, some best practice examples that we think illustrate the value of strategic intelligence and how you can actually use it in practice as well. So we have some good examples lined up for you there. Great, but let's dive into this then and start really by thinking about what the difference is between more tactical and more strategic intelligence. So David, if you want to kick off sort of on the tactical side of things and I explain a bit how you would describe that.
Sure. I think it ultimately comes down to, understanding the purpose of your intelligence capability. It might be there to help enable sales or to help look at win-loss or to address some tactical issues. So really looking at a pull approach where people are coming to you, your stakeholders, and pulling content from you. And that requires you to look at more operational or kind of in the field type of insights. So you're typically collecting data, information, you're doing web scraping, you're capturing published information around pricing, certainly to feed into sales enablement, understanding why we're winning and losing, might be some survey driven results. And so I tend to look at tactical as being more to help with strategy execution. So the operational piece of business, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a lot of companies that spend a lot of their time there. I think you'll find as we go through the session, and certainly based on my 3 decades of experience, the strategic intelligence tends to offer greater value ultimately, especially with those that hold the purse strings, when we have those opportunities to work with them. So while tactical might be working more with individuals that lead a functional area, sales or marketing or operations, or more mid-tier type of individuals that are in certain regions, if you look on the right-hand side here, and we start thinking about strategic intelligence, this is more trying to understand the ultimate initiatives of the organization, and you're going to consistently push out regular content in different intervals based on the cadence of when decisions are being made. So this tends to be looking at things more like, early warning, seeing around the corner before it actually happens. How can you look at scenario planning or business wargaming to inform and advise on strategy formulation? So while tactical is more about supporting intelligence needs related to delivery or execution, I want you to think more about strategic intelligence around the formulation of strategy and the bigger priorities where the company's really investing in. And that tends to involve individuals that are more VP, senior VP, executive leadership team type of individuals, and ultimately helps to directly impact strategic planning, sometimes M&A due diligence type of work before acquiring a particular organization, and market entry and defense, really thinking about, we want to enter into a new category or a new region. How do I make sure that's the right selection, the right investment for us? And then finally, you might have deliverables that center around understanding new technologies and innovation. Again, very strategic, dynamic issues come at play for that. So there's always a mix that happens, but I would encourage you to continue to, even if you're doing a lot of tactical, make sure you're linking it back to the strategic decisions that are being made.
Yeah, no, I like that. I also typically see that there's like a time factor in this as well. Tactical intelligence and decisions tend to be much more short-sighted. So like you look 1 to 3 months ahead, maybe in time, and that's it. That's as far as you see. Whilst with strategic intelligence, you're looking more sort of 1 to 3 years ahead in time. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, I think so. And tactical might even be a little longer, might even be 6 to 12 months, depending on the industry. Tech industry, it might be a lot faster. Insurance, maybe a little bit slower process there, right? But yes, ultimately there is a time dimension. And end of the day, it's really understanding over the next 6, 12, 18 months, what are the key strategic decisions that your leadership's looking to make, and how can you inform those decisions?
Yeah. Good. So that's sort of the foundation of what we're going to be talking about. It's more on the right-hand side of this slide that we will be dealing with today. And then going into sort of what can happen if we don't have strategic intelligence. And I know you have some great examples here, David. There's so many cases where companies have lacked this, but this is a fantastic example here with Netflix.
Yeah, and folks, I'm going to probably have my pace accelerate at times. We have a fair amount to cover with you in a short period of time. So hopefully you're keeping up with me. I have a deep passion still for what we do, so I could get going pretty fast. So I apologize if I'm too fast here, but most of us on this call are familiar with the Netflix and Blockbuster story here. And of course, back in 2000, Netflix had the opportunity to sell to Blockbuster for about $50 million, and they were literally laughed out of the room. And so you see Netflix, sending out all their DVDs and mail. Then they disrupted themselves and started streaming in 2007. Then disrupted themselves again and started creating original content. So of course we know that a couple of years after Netflix started streaming, Blockbuster went bankrupt and Netflix continued to soar. But what a lot of people don't know, or don't really think about, is the fact that Jim Keyes, who was the CEO at the time, did an interview with Motley Fool, which is a kind of an investment show, TV show. And they talked about the rise of streaming companies, in particular of Netflix. And this was an amazing quote that Jim Keyes has stated. He said, "Netflix or Redbox are not even on the radar screen in terms of competition." How can they not be on your radars? You just learned about them, 7, 8 years earlier, coming to want to sell to you. They outlined their plan, their vision with you. In 2007, they started to take some of your share away, and you just didn't really feel any threat whatsoever. So this is where obviously then the net result is you could see their enterprise value as of yesterday / this morning is around $149 billion. So, without the strategic intelligence to really understand where the market was going, where customers' demands and requirements were going, decisions were made thinking that they had it all figured out when they didn't.
Yeah. No, and there are many examples in history of this as well. But again, I think this illustrates the point that what can happen if you don't have strategic intelligence is that you are basically erased from the market and you go bankrupt. That's the magnitude of this if you don't have some sort of foresight.
Absolutely. What's interesting is there's a lot of different vantage points, different perspectives that we all have, right? So one individual looks at this and sees 7 objects, one sees 5. One's right, one's wrong. They're both right, they're both wrong. Depends on your point of view. So if you continue on and think about our friend Prince William, you know, many of you may have seen this particular image come up on the left here saying, hey, is he really flipping people off? It's like, no, he's not doing that, you know. But the end of the day, strategic intelligence really comes down to one word, folks. If you walk away with anything, it's understanding this one word, and that is strategic intelligence is about perspective. It's about perspective. So we want to make sure that you bring that perspective. We want to not just give the data, not just give the information. That might work for some things, but if you really want to get the ears of your head of strategy and have leadership listen to you, you got to bring your point of view to the table.
No, I love these 2 examples, especially I remember this picture actually, and it's just taken from 2 different angles, and it conveys a completely different message depending on what angle you're looking at it from. But what would you say then, what sort of are executives looking for in terms of strategic intelligence? What type of decisions do they need to support them?
Well, I think anything that's about the future, you know, there are several in our industry that will, and I agree with that intelligence, especially competitive intelligence, not competitor intelligence. Competitive intelligence is not about the past. It's not even really about the present. It really is all about the future. What's going to happen ahead of time? What are the alternative strategies, the alternative futures? What do those look like? So the more you can give insights about what's going to happen further ahead, I think avoiding surprises. You know, you go back to any number of examples where somebody is surprised by a new entrant coming into the field. There were signs showing that they were coming most often. A holistic viewpoint, so a 360 perspective, not just from the competitors, what's happening with suppliers and regulatory and political climate and customers and all the other parts of the ecosystem to tell the whole kind of the story around what does it all mean. Certainly being able to identify hidden opportunities and blunting threats that exist. It sounds like normal things. Yeah, of course, these make sense. But I'm here to share with you, intelligence practitioners are not consistently focusing on these things. They're often pulled into, can you get me the pricing of this? Or what's their go-to-market strategy over here? Or what's happening with their distribution? Or why did they hire that person? And a lot of these things that might have some value, but not like strategic intelligence world. And then, of course, identifying market shifts, seeing changes in other industries that might ultimately come into your industry or other regions of the world that might ultimately come into your region of the world, and seeing it early enough so you can actually pivot and do something if they believe you, right? If the leadership actually believes you and wants to move on what you say. Yeah.
I agree completely with this, and this takes us in to how we actually advise leadership on these things, and what role does a competitive intelligence function have to support these types of decisions, and that takes us in to the 3 pillars of strategic intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the critical part here, right? When you think about wanting to support mission critical decisions, you know, avoiding those surprises with early warning. And of course, everything we do should add value. So if we were to break those down a little bit more, we look at that first one around, supporting mission critical types of decisions, right? What does that mean? Well, mission critical can mean basically making sure that nothing happens to affect our normal operations. We don't want any interruptions. And then there's also, business critical, that we have to understand, how do we make sure that we're going to be around, that we're surviving, especially changes and disruptions that are happening in the marketplace here, right? So we have to better understand how do we safeguard the organization, and strategy is a key way to make sure we do that we're going in the right direction. So I want to encourage you to really focus on the types of engagements that are going to impact that strategic direction.
And do you have any Any examples of mission critical decisions that you think executives need to take?
Yeah, I think just anything that's going to affect long-term strategy, right? And if you see, like, Amazon's been disrupting everybody forever, right? And so, understanding sometimes it's just noise, but other times it could be really meaningful impact to your business. So I think looking at, the future-based scenarios and thinking about, those alternatives. When we went through COVID, and some areas still going through COVID, we never did more scenario planning ever, right? People wondering the what ifs. And so I think those types of things about, much like enterprise risk management, right? They look at the issues that are catastrophic to the business, the issues that you can bring the business down. Same thing here with intelligence. How can we inform those significant investment decisions that are being made at a grander scale, not just how to win a particular deal?
So it's a really decisions that affect the entire operations of the company. It could be also, what company should we merge with, or where should we locate our next factory, or those type of decisions, not exactly which how are you going to sell the next deal or things like that.
Certainly, those are key factors. And I think as we talk about, pushing intelligence to leadership here, it all comes down to how do we differentiate, right? So as an intelligence provider, if you could really understand what the strategic priorities are of leadership, and are they right now focused on mitigating risks, defending share, or is it about growth? Most CEOs want growth, and to gain growth, you have to gain a sustainable advantage. And to gain a sustainable advantage, you need to have competitive intelligence to be able to help with that. So the more that we can help them with feeling more confident that they're making the right investment decisions, that they take into consideration areas they might not have considered, that all adds tremendous value, and they will respect that input.
And when you say also executives, can you give some examples of sort of what type of, is it just for the CEO, or who is the main receiver of this intel?
Well, unfortunately, it's probably still not necessarily the CEO. We would love it to be, right? But we're not still quite there. However, there are members of their leadership team for sure. Head of strategy. You're looking at people who are the change agents within the organization. So presidents of business units as well. Certainly, the CEO may be somewhat involved, depending on how supportive they are in the intelligence capability. But really, it's that next tier of executives that are responsible then for formulating that strategy and then also helping to execute it. So you see whether they are in business development or M&A, or in roles that allow them to seize opportunities and can put some funding behind that to go after those opportunities and take the risks, to win.
Great. Thanks for that. And then we'll move on from the first pillar to the second pillar, which is about avoiding surprises with early warning systems, so that you are prepared for what's coming ahead.
Yeah. So really quickly, folks, because again, we could spend an entire day on this topic alone. I have a perspective I've developed over the years. Also, if you're interested, Ben Galad has a book out called Early Warning, which is worth the read as well. But end of the day, we want to be able to see around the corner before it's happening, and to give us time to maneuver and to proactively take action. So, want to encourage you, if you don't have some kind of an early warning program, to think about creating one. And I wouldn't do it enterprise wide right away. Just do a small pilot. Heck, you don't even have to tell anybody you're doing it. That way you don't have to be held accountable if you miss something. I don't know if any of you ever seen the movie Armageddon with Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck, and this meteor or asteroids coming down to Earth, right? And they say, hey, how come we didn't see this coming? And say, well, because our space monitoring budget's only about $1 million, and it allows us to monitor about 3% of the space, and it's a big ass space, so you're not going to catch everything, right? But we want to be able to understand what are the future scenarios, so that you can ultimately identify the indicators or the observable events that you can track that will tell you which future scenario is more plausible to happen. So as you see certain indicators that are unique to scenario A start to emerge, you can feel more confident that, hey, we believe scenario A is going to start to happen. So as you all probably are experiencing, we have non-traditional competitors entering our space. You have new business models. You have all these other external forces that are coming into play. So we have to be able to assess that in a way that allows us to know which is real and which is just rumor and noise out there. So make sure you understand where decisions are being made in your company. Do you know? What are the cadence meetings? Where are the actual discussions taking place? So you know how far in advance of that meeting you have to provide your strategic intelligence so it gets considered and ideally used. We want to make sure that we're looking at the risks and the opportunities about the future that are ahead of us, and then track those indicators using some automation tools, using some primary research, using some other qual and quant type of methods to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening, so that when you see key indicators coming up, that it can trigger a conversation or an alert to leadership to say, we still have kind of low confidence, but we're seeing these two things happening right now. So it's starting to suggest to us that scenario 2 is likely to happen. And then you'll have a conversation about that, and they'll probably won't believe it yet. And then you just have to find more indicators until you get to the point where you learn early enough that something's happened. So you're not reactive, you can actually be proactive in your mindset.
So sounds like from a CI perspective, it's super important to really define these key indicators well. If you have those well defined, it will be easier to track, and then you can connect it to the future scenarios.
For sure. And we'll share a couple of examples in the case studies, that we'll talk about on that. But end of the day, pull a cross-functional workshop together of a couple hours talking about your future-based scenarios and getting input from marketing and sales and finance and legal and operations to understand, how would you know if this future scenario is coming along? What would you start to see happening? Because they're each going to have a different lens. So you might end up with 50, 75 different indicators. And that's why you need some tools that will allow you to track that, because you can't do it all manually.
Good. So we've talked about supporting the critical decisions, avoiding surprises with early warning. The third pillar is, of course, once you have these, is to make sure that you actually deliver value and impact. And how can you do that?
Yeah, folks, I always share that, we are not in the nice to know business. You're not in the nice to know business, right? Oh, it'd be nice to know this. No, that's not what we do, right? Every intelligence deliverable has to have impact and value. If it doesn't, why are we doing it? Right? So I want to encourage you to really assess and be careful about what you take on, because you don't have unlimited resources. Heck, some of you on the call might be the sole CI practitioner inside your organization. So being very selective about the type of work you do becomes really important. So I'm a big believer that if you deliver a project and leadership or your end stakeholder says, it was okay, it was all right, it's like, what do you mean it was all right? I answered everything you wanted to answer. Then it comes down to either you didn't scope the project right, or you delivered poor quality. Because how can they not find value in what you delivered, right? So you got to engage on a regular basis with your stakeholders. So making sure that you understand early on what it is that they want from the intelligence capability, how they're going to assess the overall value that they're receiving, and ultimately, at a very high level, the stakeholder is the one that has to tell you if they got value. If you go to a restaurant and you have a steak dinner, the chef doesn't come out and tell you, hey, you enjoyed my steak. I'll tell you if I enjoyed it. It depends how it was seasoned and the temperature and how long it took and the quality of the meat and the atmosphere. I might weigh all kinds of things. So I have to decide that. Well, same thing, folks, with our intelligence work, right? So I want you to think about, I'm going to share with you at a very, very high level, a framework that we created back in 2006 that kind of builds off the work that Jan Herring did on measures of effectiveness. And we created a framework that we call Rocky. Play the theme song music right there, right? Rocky, return on competitive intelligence. So it's not true ROI, but it's close. It's return on competitive intelligence. It's like return on assets, return on equity. It's a new metric, right? So everybody listening to this now or in the recording later, I want you to draw a triangle. So grab your pen, draw a triangle. Why a triangle? Because every good model is the shape of a triangle. I don't know. So at the bottom of that triangle, I want you to write down identified metrics. You got to start by understanding what are the metrics each of our stakeholders will even consider when they assess the value of what you're delivering. So the stakeholder has to tell you that, and it's going to be different for each stakeholder that you look at. If I'm working with somebody in operations and they say, well, I'm measured by, I have to increase productivity 18% and reduce labor 7%. Okay, everything I deliver better somehow link back to those metrics, right? Because that's what they are measured on. So what are they going to measure to assess your value? The second part, the left part of that triangle, I want you to write down the words, assess impact. So if you know what you're going to be measured on, what do you do next? You measure it, right? So just like if you are receiving any annual performance reviews, you know what you're measured on, and then your manager and you manage that, or you measure that against what you're measured on. Or if you're a publicly held company, here are all the metrics that we're going to put in our annual report, and then you measure against those, right? You need your stakeholder, though, to tell you what they thought the value was of it. Not you. If they don't give you the answers, then you might have to create some believable, defendable assumptions that go into that. On the right side of the triangle, I want you to write the words deliver report, right? This is now where people fall short in the intelligence world. They might know what to measure. They may even measure it, but now they don't brag. It's okay to boast, put out a quarterly report showing, yeah, listen, we've invested, 100,000 or 500,000, euros into our intelligence capability. However, based on the feedback from our stakeholders, it's had a 2,000% return because they have told us the direct impact or indirect impact that it's had on their decisions, right? And then in the center of the triangle, I want you to write the word culture. We have to have a CI supportive culture. Everybody has to play their role a little bit here to be able to understand the ultimate value and how we are not an expense. We're not an expense. We're an asset on the balance sheet. And you can become more of an asset when you deliver strategic intelligence because you're connected now with the longer term vision and direction of the company. And the people who own the budgets tend to share more when they're directly affected. And not that you can't get value from tactical intelligence. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just telling you can get more value into the company by working with strategic intelligence.
Mm-hmm. And then it sounds like, David, as well, is that you're more focused on quality rather than quantity. I've seen some CI departments, they pump out lots of newsletters and a lot of material, but it's really getting the quality insights that has the real value that you're looking for.
Absolutely. And I think in a moment, we'll share with you guys some different potential ways to show value in both qualitative and quantitative ways. We'll give you kind of a laundry list here in a moment.
Great. So those were the 3 pillars that we wanted to share with you. Supporting critical decisions, having an early warning system, making sure that you deliver value and impact. We're going to share a couple of examples now as well, but just a reminder that you have any questions or any thoughts, any feedback for us, if you agree with us or not, then please use the chat function. And we'll try to respond either as we go along, or we'll save it for the Q&A session at the end.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, when doing research too, there is this find it out versus figure it out methodology, right? So a lot of times you'll see the collection of puzzle pieces out there, right? And you hear that all the time. And that's critical for strategic intelligence because you have to ultimately use analysis, whether it's 5 forces or Porter's 4 corners or a steep analysis or a radar or a strategic SWOT to ultimately see the picture of what's happening, right? So we need to collect all the different puzzle pieces and through our analysis, be able to, on the right-hand part of this slide, see the end result in terms of the strategic picture that's happening. So as you're doing that, you also, as we said, want to deliver value. And so when you think about quantitative or qualitative measures of how that picture will translate into value, here's some ideas for you. And you may have some of your own or something that's different, but certainly the more you can quantify things, executives like that, in particular CFOs. But I will share that increasingly CFOs are even telling me, and I've had the opportunity to talk to 3 different CFOs from Fortune 100 companies in the last couple of months, and that they realize it can be challenging to show a dollar value. So qualitative measurements are just as important. So yes, the more you could link what you do to cost avoidance or cost savings or making time or money, or you help to extend the product life cycle because you found some new adjacencies that now links to a strategic decision to invest into a different category, or just being able to enter into new regions. There's also qualitative measures of executives feeling more confident now in their decisions after your intelligence than before the intelligence, that you're able to help make sure that you pressure tested their strategies, and now they're coming up with more effective strategies. Their decision-making time in making those strategic decisions are not dragged on forever because of the intelligence that you are providing. You're able to help inform innovation, or you're able to help even just get testimonials saying how great what you provided is and how it really helped to impact the decisions from a strategic level that they're making. So tactical, you might look at win rates, you might look at win-loss results. Again, all valuable things, how you help to certainly win revenue. But these are some other things from a strategic standpoint to think about how you can show your value. So if you're not doing some of these, always try to go back and link what you did back to the value, and realize that with strategic intelligence, that's not overnight. You're not going to see the value till 6, 12, 18 months later sometimes than what you delivered. So you have to make sure you put that tickler in your calendar to go back with those stakeholders and understand, once things are being decided, how your intelligence helped to inform those decisions and the value it created.
Yeah. Great, thanks for that, David. We have a couple of examples that we would like to show just how strategic intelligence can have a huge effect on different organizations. And I think the first one is one that I'd like to share. This is from an oil and gas company. They were a Finnish company. They used to be called Neste Oil. And I like this because it shows how tools like intelligence today can be used to spot things that you might not have your full attention on at this moment. In this case, the analysts at this company, they were looking at oil and gas. And again, this is just for illustrative purposes. But oil and gas was their main business a couple of years ago. But suddenly they could see sort of in the news coming in, there's a word cloud. They could see the word hydrogen popping up all the time. And hydrogen wasn't really on their topic map, but it was something that they could track over time, that this is popping up, and they observed it. Then it was up to them. So they made the observation. Then it was up to them to decide, will this have an impact on us? Is it important, this word coming up? And then how? Is it something that we should track and start following? And if you do that, then you can sort of see in the news that there are things popping up. In this case, this is an example. This is an article that shows Neste becoming more involved in green hydrogen. So something completely different to what they were doing before. And once you've spotted that signal and see something is happening here, and you have a tool to help you do that, going through all the huge volumes of information, but you see there's a little signal, you decide to track it, then you can start taking action. You start reading the articles, maybe you put it on your monitoring map, you start commenting it, you share it with other people. Other people need to find out this. You might sort of flag it that this is a threat, this is an opportunity, so that other people can get involved. And then at the end of the day, what was interesting with this case is that they completely transformed from being an oil and gas company. In 2015, they even changed their name. So they took away oil from their name, and now they're just Neste, a green hydrogen company. And if you had an early warning system in place, this was quite, I wouldn't say easy, but it was very evident, at least looking back, that this was actually happening, and this company was going through this transformation. So it's an example of how early warning signals actually led to action, and then you would have to position yourselves and work this into your strategy. How are you going to deal with this? So this is one example of how tools can help you spot signals and then act upon them in time. I know that you have an example as well, David, of a scenario case as well.
I do. And before I share that, again, going back to the Rocky framework, if anyone, just a cheap plug here, if you go to proactiveworldwide.com and go under resources, you'll see some articles, but there's an article on demonstrating the value of CI that explains that process in more detail. Again, we only have a few minutes with you here today.
But
yes,
send
the
out,
other
when we send out the slides as well, we can include a link to that as well.
Perfect. So yes, and the other example I want to share here is I'm going to ask you all to picture that you are the head of strategy of a Fortune 500 organization in the health and beauty industry, and you are commissioned to develop the 3-year strategic plan and understand where you're going to place the bets. And the executive leadership team has some major investment decisions to make. And you hear a rumor that there's a potential new entrant coming into your space here. And rather than immediately react, you call upon your internal competitive intelligence team or an outside CI agency, and you ask for help to dig deeper into, is there any merit to this rumor happening here? And as the head of strategy, you're generally not too concerned ever about what one action a particular competitor might take. You have bigger things to worry about that are on your mind. However, you are concerned that there might be a bigger emerging threat here that you need to consider before formulating your final strategies. So, the CI team goes out and they identify about 30 different indicators or weak signals or observable events that they're going to track, so that when they see these starting to emerge, it will help them to determine whether or not there's really a new entrant that might come into the space. So with secondary and primary research, over time, they start tracking these particular indicators, and slowly they start to emerge, right? They see one non-traditional competitor posting job ads for R&D personnel. Permits were filed for a new manufacturing facility. Sales, engineering, and marketing personnel were hired. The industry itself, raw material suppliers, were starting to increase their capacity potential. The company retained an advertising agency that specializes in the health and beauty industry. Trademarks were registered. Buyers at grocery stores were telling you that somebody's coming in to pitch new products down your aisle, and so on. And so as information moves from secret to private to public, the intelligence folks are gathering different nuggets of information. Again, any one piece doesn't really tell you anything, but as you are piecing that all together, you start to see the story emerge, and they can ultimately convert data or information into strategic intelligence. Please don't provide to senior executives data or information. You need to be able to link it back to the intelligence and the insights around that. So ultimately, what they did figure out 6 months before launch was that, yes, we're seeing these different indicators. We did conclude that there is truth to the merit to the rumor, sort of, partially. See, what they really learned was that this competitor was not launching one product. They were going to launch a product line, 14 SKUs, $60 million ad budget, $90 million promo budget, and they were launching during the Super Bowl. So imagine being the executive thinking, there's some company who might be coming up with something, I'm not too concerned, to learning that this is a major assault on the lifeblood of your organization. Right. And so rather than treating that flippantly, certainly the head of strategy commissioned some interaction with the sales and marketing leads. They had some tactical actions they had to make immediately. They were offering 2-for-1 sales, discounts, coupons. They secured more shelf space. When the competitor did enter, they did take a hit in their market share, but not nearly what they would have if they didn't have these insights. They would have been totally blindsided and completely surprised. Mm-hmm. However, and here's where it gets interesting. And even more importantly, the CI team didn't stop there. They ultimately provided extra value and context about the overall situation by considering what others were doing, what was happening with suppliers, what was happening with customers, what was happening with other competitors, regulatory issues, distributors, and ultimately we were able to provide several options to leaders about competitive actions from a strategic standpoint that they need to be taken to ultimately differentiate themselves in the future. And they weren't viewed now as just another Me Too player. They had to find that new blue ocean to go after out there. And so not only did they make their recommendations, they ultimately were able to map out alternative future strategies, and they were listened to, it was adopted, and the head of strategy incorporated some changes to their strategic plan to take them on a different path. So bottom line of all this is the one thing you need to do as an intelligence professional, if you want your head of strategy or some other C-suite executives to actually listen to you, gain respect for you, is you have to offer perspective. You have to offer your point of view on the situation and give them some understanding about what it is you think they should do from a strategic standpoint, right? You're not telling them what to do, but you're going to lay out some options and give some considerations for them to make that choice. That's where the real value comes in, and the type of dialogue you can have with them now, not just about the entrance. What's the bigger picture that means to our whole industry?
Mm-hmm. And was there any way that they could quantify or measure the value of this in terms of CI to sort of prove that?
Yeah, there was. They actually realized that if they didn't know about the intelligence, they probably would have taken about a 30% hit on their market share. But because of some of the things they did, they took a short-term 10% hit on their market share. So again, going from right to left on this slide here, as information becomes available through kind of the entire value chain before you walk down the aisle and see something on the shelf, right? You're learning. They ultimately identified a new category as well that they could be completely unique and differentiated in, and that certainly had a revenue gain to it that added value based, again, all the way back to this initial rumor tracking and then linking it back to strategic intelligence. So not just stopping with, yes, they're entering, you have to take it to the next level.
Yeah, and they took action as well. I like
Absolutely.
It's not
strategic and tactical.
Yeah, no, because sometimes companies, they can see that things are happening, but they still don't take action. But in this case, they actually did something with the intelligence as well.
Yeah, it really comes down to credibility. Sometimes people ask, why, what if these leaders don't listen to you, right? To me, then you haven't developed a deep enough relationship with them, and you haven't built the right level of credibility with them for them to listen with you. So work on that.
Yeah. Great, great case. Time is ticking, and as you say, we could probably spend much more time on this, but time to start wrapping things up a bit, and some of the key takeaways that we have here.
Yeah, and end of the day, if you're doing tactical intelligence, that's fine. We're just suggesting to you that you will gain more value and contribute more value ultimately when you can affect the strategic direction of the organization. Not that tactical intelligence doesn't add value. It certainly does, but not at the same level that I've seen anyway, that Jesper's seen over the years. End of the day, leaders want to assess and decide. They don't necessarily want to do the thinking behind all the data, right? And the information. That's our job, to convert that into intelligence, right? They don't want to see the data. Some do. I mean, some executives do. And that's quite frankly where then it's not even really competitive intelligence at that point. We're asking for data. You want to help to give them insight around what that data means in terms of intelligence. When you're presenting, speak with comfort and confident and conviction, right? You have to be confident in your findings for them to believe you. If you're not sure, though, on something, it's okay to say you have a low confidence on or you're at the early stages of learning something, right? That's okay as well. And then a final couple of takeaways. Share your perspectives. Don't worry about if you're right or wrong. Just share your take on it. What's your lens telling you about what you see in the marketplace, that's going to cause you to challenge that status quo. And then finally, make sure you take the time. I know it can be time intensive at times, but take the time to show the value, get the dialogue from your stakeholders, have them let you, after every engagement, tell you what the value was to them of what you deliver. And if they say they didn't get value, then I'd go back and revisit the scope of the engagement and the quality of what you delivered, because how can you not have value if you answered everything they wanted to address?
But then you have to be really sure that you know what they want to address. So you have to be part of that strategic conversation as well, so that you know what they're looking for. And I feel that sometimes where we struggle, or competitive intelligence analysts, is that you're not even part of the strategic discussion. And then it's, of course, hard to deliver.
Indeed.
Any thoughts on that?
I think just understand where and when decisions are being made. So if you think about, strategy, understanding what the cadence looks like for those decisions, and be able to see if you can at least observe, sit in and listen so you can hear firsthand what's happening. So then you could come back with some ideas around what you could deliver, and then have that confirmed that that's that type of insight would add value before you go down that path.
Great, thanks for that. We do have a couple of minutes for questions. If there are any questions from the audience, feel free to enter that into the chat. I have a little spin-on question on what we were just talking about, but what happens if you don't have that sort of buy-in, or if leadership don't sort of embrace you and don't invite you to participate in the strategic discussions? Any sort of hint or any tips on what to do to get invited?
My friend Joe Goldberg, who used to run Motorola's intelligence unit many years ago, used to say, you have to be sufficiently annoying. So you have to make it clear that the part of the purpose is to help them inform better decisions, and to do that you need their engagement, that you're not there to just blend into the back wall. And so I think being able to find that C-suite champion, even if they're not in your direct reporting chain of command, find somebody that can communicate with that peer level to get them excited and get them to commit to be able to be part of the process here, and maybe even have some lunch and learns or some type of introductions about, again, what it is you offer, what you do, the value you create, and use those testimonials, use those success stories to share with leadership, to get them excited about what you're really doing. We're not just doing Google searches all day. Right?
No, and I see there's a comment on this as well from our friend Derek Johnson at Aurora as well. He believes in creating friction with your stakeholders. So some sort of, some making them uncomfortable, some sort of conflict to get some sort of response. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think healthy conflict is important. I mean, you don't want to piss people off, but you certainly want to challenge the status quo in a context, in a professional way that gets them to maybe be a little uncomfortable about what's going on in the marketplace. And so I totally agree with that comment, that friction. And, we don't always deliver good news, right? As intelligence professionals, we're not going to deliver what they want to hear. We're going to give unbiased, objective input, and they can accept it or not. But we have to be able to, understand the problems that we're trying to solve, and let them know that, we're going to bring issues to the forefront that nobody else might be bringing.
No, and one thing that I've experienced as well, I mean, working with competitive intelligence and foresight, and you're always looking ahead and trying to find early warning signals, that puts you in a position that many other people in the company might not be in. They haven't spent the time, and they're sort of stuck in their routines. And I remember when we were working at Ericsson, we saw quite clearly that there was a big shift towards internet technology. And for us, it was very clear because we had been through that journey, so to speak, and we had looked at all the signals and read all the documents. But then to share that with decision makers who were used to something completely different, sometimes that message is too abrupt or too different, and they have to say, you have to take it slow sometimes, or to take them through the journey.
That's why you have to profile your stakeholders. You have to understand their decision-making style. Some people, if you don't talk socially for 10 minutes, they don't want to talk business, right? Others, they don't care what you did over the weekend. They want to get right to the business, right? So you have to understand what causes them to make decisions, and what type of communication style they have, right? To know how to wean that in, because some you have to wean it, some might have to say, just hit me between the eyes, right? But you have to develop that relationship, and it takes time to get mutual trust and comfort.
No, and I think that's a super important point, is know your stakeholders and know how they communicate. Some people want it sort of verbally, they want a presentation. Some people want a report. Some people want to find out themselves. And you really have to be able to adapt to that to make them take in the information and take action. Great. Any other questions or comments that we have before we wrap things up? I can't see anything else in here. I think we've covered most of it. You did a great job in such a short period of time.
As did you.
I think if people watch the recording, they can perhaps slow it down if we went too fast. But just, I mean, we're super happy to do this, super happy to have you on board with us, David. Of course, both of us were happy to answer any questions, to connect on LinkedIn. Please read our books as well, where we share additional insights. And then remember that, as we said, building a strategic intelligence capability is a journey. It's not something that's done in a day or two. It takes time to, I think, develop this kind of trust that you were talking about, David, and so that you get into the strategic decision-making process.
Absolutely. My only final thought is, and even if you're doing more tactical, it was about half the group said they were doing probably less than 50% from your initial survey, in strategic. Just make sure you link back any of the tactical stuff to strategic initiatives or strategic plans or priorities that will give you the opportunity to start to convert more of your work to strategic intelligence versus just tactical.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jesper and David, for this insightful presentation. And thanks to all of our participants for being here with us today. I hope you all enjoyed this webinar. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us using the email address displayed on the screen. We look forward to the opportunity to connect with you again in the near future. Thank you and bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone.